This was a presentation given at the first iPads in Higher Education conference held on the 20th to the 22nd of March in Cyprus. The audience was impressed with the scale and the impact on the change that iPads were having at the university. My name is Lynnae Rankine. I'm Blended Learning Manager for the University of Western Sydney.
Hi, I'm Macnamara. I'm a Blended Learning Consultant at UWS, and I participated in the conference in Cyprus through Twitter along with some other colleagues back in Sydney, and was able to see all the great tweets about Lynnae's presentation and get some of the excitement of the performance.
The University of Western Sydney is located on the east coast of Australia. We're 25 years old, celebrating our birthday this month. We've primarily been a face-to-face teaching university, and we have 9 schools ranging from business, law, medicine, science, humanities, communication arts, nursing, midwifery, education, and we're one of the youngest and biggest institutions in Australia.
Okay, the iPads, how has the university been transforming? Our blended learning strategy, we've worked very carefully to come up with the best arrangements for learning for students we can, and we've got 3 key components to our blended learning strategy. One is providing exciting, engaging on-campus learning experiences so that when students come on campus, they do some really deep learning and they really engage and having a lot of fun, we hope. We also provide synchronous and asynchronous online learning activities to provide flexibility for students who have busy other lives so that they don't have to come on campus as often to access learning. They can access some of their learning, in some cases all their learning, online in various ways. And finally, we provide integrated community-based learning activities, which might be in the workplace or in other community activities. And this is really important for us, for a university that exists in a community that's not that oriented towards higher education. We wanted to take the university learning out into the community. What are the numbers like in terms of blended learning? Well, they're huge. In last year, we blended 283 first-year units. This year, we're blending 493 second-year units, and next year we intend to blend 455 third-year units, so that all units of undergraduate study will be blended by the end of next year. So a very large undertaking.
Prior to the university's investment in blended learning, there was a small central team providing academic development support. But as part of the investment strategy, there has been quite an intensive recruitment activity of blended learning advisors and designers operating in schools in a hub and spokes model, working in conjunction with the small central team. So we have about 40 of these specialists who are working in a community of practice. They're sharing information and knowledge and skills across their schools and within their schools. And we run communities of practice events such as musters, social media, email lists, and we have a charter of expertise and expectations so that everybody is working towards common goals. Some of the key activities that we're doing with our blended learning specialists are professional development, considering how iPads are being used in quite innovative ways. And to give you an example, last year we ran a series of webinars and workshops, about 60 of these, including 9 blended learning forums where academics and blended learning professionals were sharing their expertise and what they were doing in terms of using iPads to support teaching. We had about 2,000 registrations at these events.
30,000 iPads. What impact did that have? Well, the first impact it had was excitement. Just delivering 30,000 iPads for students. When they come to collect them, they brought their families. It was the event in itself. And the other thing the iPads did is that when we first introduced the idea of blended learning to university, there was the usual, are they serious? What's going on? Well, the whole point of one of the impacts of buying 30,000 iPads was, well, they must be serious. That's really going to have some huge impact on the way the students learn and the way that the academics teach.
There's many examples of how iPads are transforming the university. So let's hear from one of our academics about how she's using iPads in her teaching.
So in my teaching for my big first year unit, which is Maths Engineers 1, I started off by showing them some apps that they may like to use, so PDF readers, things like that, because all their lecture notes are provided online, and I thought students may want to have that capability of being able to download their notes, annotate it while they're in lectures, and so save paper costs and things like that. And showing them perhaps some of the apps that I've found, things like in the mathematics area that they can graph functions with, so showing them some apps that do that, showing them some apps where they perhaps can find solutions to their questions and that sort of thing. And I have my iPad with me in lectures, that I have my cheat notes on my iPad so that I know the solutions to the questions I'm working through there. Because I don't use PowerPoint for the maths lectures, I use the document camera and actually work through questions in front of them, because for them working through the maths is important to see how it's done step by step, rather than just seeing it as a one total picture which they try to remember off by heart, and it's not a good way to know how things work. So just by showing them how I use it, I've recently also started in one of my tutorials, I've downloaded a class list, and so I mark the class list on my iPad, so it saves me time coming back here to actually have to tick off names and re-enter it into an Excel spreadsheet, things like that. So experimenting with how I can help students use it, but also how it can make my job a little bit easier.
The university is moving towards more activity-rich on-campus experiences. So these include seminars and workshops and tutorial group work activities, etc. These provide more flexibility for students, but more importantly, they also provide a real value and reason for coming on campus. So in some of our schools, and there's no formal lectures, there are more activity-based discussions, group works, practicals, labs and those sorts of things. But we are using iPads as student response systems. They're used in group works, digital storytelling, mind mapping, as well as annotating lecture notes and readings. The second dimension that Dennis was talking about our blended learning approach is about synchronous and asynchronous learning activities. We have a blended learning technology toolkit which provides a range of teaching activities and suggested technologies. And these are linked to learning and teaching strategies, self-help resources and professional development. So they really guide academics and our blended learning professionals to think about how they can use technologies effectively to support different teaching activities. And the blended learning technology toolkit is a mix of iPad apps, softwares and features of the learning management system. Our virtual learning environment, or our LMS, is Blackboard. We have both staff and students who are creating and publishing iBooks. We're also using mobile apps such as Evernote, Blackboard, Explain Everything, Erasma, Poplet and Prezi. And in some of our courses, these apps are used by students to complete certain assessment tasks. We're also using the iTunes U, and we're using that in a way of providing supplementary materials and also sample courses that people might want to enrol in later. The third aspect of our blended learning approach is the integrated community engagement, and we're committed to building partnerships with our community and linking that to regional priorities. And students are volunteering more, they're working in workplace engagement activities, and they're taking their iPads out and about. And this is one example of how iPads are being used in outside of campus.
We want students to be curious about buildings under construction. So if they go past the building under construction, we want them to look at it. And they can use the iPad to photograph things that they need to ask about. It's really important for someone who's going to work in the construction industry to be interested in buildings. They shouldn't walk past a construction site and not look. They should be used to looking, and then if they can document that and ask the questions about it afterwards, that's really useful, and the portability of the iPad allows you to do that.
And I saw the Lend-Lease block and all the construction they're doing, and I said, I have to get this down. So I straight away took my iPad and took a photo of the block so I could see the stages of their construction and come back and ask my lecturers, oh, what are they doing here?
So how do we know this is working well? Concurrent to our blended learning strategy, we are doing research and evaluation. We have a framework in place. We're running student and staff focus groups and surveys, and we're also looking at other data sources such as analytics. Obviously, it's early days, but this framework will certainly help us measure the effectiveness of our blended learning strategy. We know that students are using their iPads heavily. More than 80% of logins to the learning management system are from an iOS device, and students are telling us that they're using their iPads a lot in a range of common learning activities, such as discussion forums, listening to recordings, tracking their grades, and also accessing assessment information.
What's been the keys to the success of the iPad usage and the blended learning in general? First of all was senior executive sponsorship of the whole thing. It was a very much a kind of everyone on side and the senior executive sponsoring the event. The partnership with Apple has been really important for the use of the iPads. Apple staff have been constant with us in the provision of professional development for our staff and indeed for our students, and have been partners in the whole process. The other aspect of success has been a whole of institutional approach. It hasn't been just patches of things. The whole of the institution has been transformed. Every single student in each year has been given iPads. Every academic staff has been given iPads. We put a lot of embedded support into the whole program. The iPads themselves. We've got, as Lynnae said earlier, designers and learning advisors in every school, every faculty, working very closely with the academics. And we've also provided time relief for busy academics to step back from their busy teaching and think about the learning design of their programs and think about how they might rethink their learning for a student focus. And the student-centered learning has been the real bonus or key to the success and a bonus from this. We recently surveyed some of our senior managers in the university and said, what do you think are the major benefits of blended learning so far? And one of the things that they kept on mentioning was a refocus on student-centered learning, that the learning was centered on the students, not on the content. And that's been a real key for us. And finally, with the keys to success, although we've bought 30,000 iPads, all the resources we've been designing, all the materials we've been putting together, as far as possible, we're making them device agnostic. Because although we've got 30,000 iPads now, who knows what we'll have in a couple of years' time. And then some students, although we provide iPads, some students choose to bring other devices. So we need to be device agnostic in everything we do.
Our blended learning strategy and iPads have really empowered academics to explore, create, innovate, and also share their experiences. As one academic, Bronwyn, said, the iPads have given them a license to thrill. The university's Quality in Learning and Teaching site, there's the URL at the top there, provides a whole range of resources, guidelines, standards, professional development and information about the blended learning strategy and how iPads can be used to support learning and teaching.
Thank you for listening to our presentation that was done in Cyprus. The one thing you won't pick up from this presentation available here is the rapturous applause that Lynnae got at the end of her presentation and the real enthusiasm from the audience for a really engaging presentation and a really thought-provoking kind of description of what's happening at UWS. Thank you.